Jim, thank you very much for coming on. Tell me about Hado. What is Hado?
Okay, so Hado is a technology that was created in Tokyo about sort of 8, 9 years ago now, as the brainchild of a guy called Hiroshi Fukuda. And he is the CEO of Meleap. Meleap is the company that created this tech. And him and his co-founders grew up in Tokyo, and everything they saw throughout their life told them they should be able to throw energy blasts from their hands. Whether it was anime, manga, computer games, movies, everything told them the same. And quite clearly they couldn't. So why couldn't they? And they wanted to build a technology that meant they could. They were already working in virtual reality and augmented reality. They wanted to apply that technology to this concept. And the first thing they came up with was a game called Hado Monster Battle, because gaming seemed to be the route to go down. And in Monster Battle, you get to battle it out against huge sort of boss monsters, because Japan, why wouldn't you want to fight kaiju? So it's all pretty obvious about how this all developed through. And the whole influence was very much coming for them from the anime Dragon Ball Z, which was their sort of like their key thing of going, everyone can do this and this. Why can't we? They realized quite early on, though, that although they'd now created something that meant they could throw energy blasts at giant monsters, it was really tempting to turn around and throw them at the person next to you. And that actually seemed like a lot more fun than the sport of Hado that's now expanding globally. That's where that came from, this idea of being able to battle it out with each other instead. And it sort of moved out from there as a concept, and kind of they sort of stumbled into a lot of the ideas and benefits of it before really realizing how much this merging of technology, this creation of what they call techno-sport, so this idea of merging physical sports and esports together, how much benefit it's got. And they've actually stumbled across a need in the market that people hadn't properly twigged was there, not quite sort of Sony Walkman level, but in that same sort of idea that they sort of created something and then realized actually there's this massive need for it, because what we find with, the benefits of physical sports are well known, vastly documented, everything else, as are the exclusivities that go with physical sports. If you're not the right size, the right strength, all these sorts of things, that the amount of training you have to do to equalize with people who have that natural advantage is vast. And in some cases is insurmountable. The difference in size and strength gives to athletes is huge, which is why you can't have an 18-year-old play against an 8-year-old and things like that, because even if you've got those skill elements, size and strength can just so severely outweigh anything you do. And that makes sports exclusive, and therefore it disenfranchises people, and a lot of people don't participate, which is why we've got growing health issues and fitness issues and everything else across society, especially here in the UK and in Japan and most developed countries. Esports, gaming, social media, massively on the rise, hugely popular. Your size, your strength, all these things are irrelevant. It's about the time you put in, the skill you put in, especially on the esports and gaming side of it. So fantastic level playing field, but you can't get away from the fact you sat in a chair. And so it deals with all these subtle issues, but all the health benefits, all the rest that you get from the sport are no longer there. And what they discovered, this blending using augmented reality for this creation of the techno-sport, meant that you had everything to do with size and strength was now being controlled by the software. So it was being standardized. So you had this level playing field of the computer game, but you had it within a physical activity, whether that be the physical gaming activities like Monster Battle or the physical sports like the main Hado, player versus player version. And so you were taking the best of both worlds, but leaving the key problematic elements of both behind.
There's a lot to unpack there. There's a couple of terms I want to clarify. So you've mentioned the term esports. So as I understand it, esports are your kind of conventional computer games, and they've been elevated to competitive, multinational, massive competitions. Then you've got the physical sports. So this is your standard kind of sports. Where do techno sports fit into that?
Okay, so I suppose the concept where esports is generally viewed as, your older esports or the ones that are more well established, things like CS:GO, Valorant, Dota, or Dota 2, things like that. Those are played on a massive global scale, huge audiences, and you normally get the whole view back of, why would I want to watch someone else play a computer game? The answer being, well, why do I want to watch someone else kick a ball around a field? In either case, are you playing? It's about whether you understand the game that you're watching, the skill involved with it, and whether you find doing so enjoyable. And that's a personal choice. Now, I suppose the differences between these physical sports, obviously all your classics, football, rugby, hockey, whatever it might be, they're very well established. They've been around for a very long time. They're part of our society. And if they answered all of the questions and problems of society when it comes to leisure, activity, and fitness, there wouldn't be a problem. But there are problems. There is lack of uptake. There is lack of interest. There is lack of engagement. And there always has been, because they've never been a complete solution, and they never will be, because humanity is too diverse in terms of what it's looking for and its needs. And the growth of gaming, the growth of esports and things has obviously shown in quite a lot of ways that, one, there's a set of needs that weren't being met, but it's also shown something else. And and we're seeing it in the rate at which people are choosing, where do they link their time? Do they watch an esports tournament, or do they watch a physical sports tournament? And the younger and younger you're looking at that audience, the more the choice is towards esports, social media, gaming, rather than physical sports. Now, if nothing's changing.
Why is that? Do you
Why
think?
is that?
Is there data on that?
There is some data out there. For me, my opinions are based on anecdotal rather than quantitative. So take it whether you want or not. But I think fundamentally what it shows, what the modern access to entertainment, to social media, to gaming, to esports shows, is that the reason physical sports were so popular was because there wasn't another choice.
So this is your option, and you have to take it, or there's nothing else that you can do, basically. Yep.
The viewing figures on BBC One were amazing when there was BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. But now there's literally thousands of channels. All the broadcast channels are pretty much dying in the dirt, and they're only kept alive by their older historical audience, and that's because those things were failing, had always been failing to offer things. And even to the people who would have gone, yeah, right, I'll do that then, there is now a more entertaining, more engaging option. The thing that esports offers, physical sports doesn't. If I watch a football match and I get completely inspired and go, that's amazing, I want to do that, I need to have a football pitch, 21 mates, that decent weather, which obviously in the UK, that's not a guarantee anyway, and to be able to go and do that. If I watch a Dota 2 or a CSGO or a Rocket League match or anything else, I go, that's amazing, I want to do that. I turn around to my computer and I press log in.
Mm-hmm. So the barriers to entry are much lower.
Accessibility, everything else. And so it's so quick, so easy to be involved. And fundamentally, sport is about community more than anything else. You might go and join a football club or a rugby club because of an interest in the sport, but you stay because of the people in the club and the community and the society. And obviously esports is very, very much about community, and it's online communities again. So again, it's communities which are really accessible, which if you're not necessarily great with face-to-face or feeling comfortable around a lot of people, well, you can choose to engage or not engage in an online community. You're not necessarily dealing with people face-to-face, so you can potentially be more confident. So it offers a huge amount to people that physical sports doesn't, hence why it's seen the huge growth it has. But as I said, both of those have got inherent issues. Obviously, you've got the inherent issues of physical sports, where it is exclusive because you've got to have the relevant size and strength. You've got to have that physicality about you to play those sorts of sports. So it has an exclusive element to it. And a lot of people get disenfranchised and convinced they're no good. There's no point even trying. It's not a thing they want to do whilst they're at school. Because if you're the last person to get picked, or you're always in the D team or C team of your school team or anything, you're not having any fun in most cases.
You're not going to want to do it. Yeah.
Because losing sucks. Why do you want to do something where you don't win, or where you consistently lose or are thought of as a weak link or anything else? And the moment someone says, do you want to stop doing this? You go, oh yeah, I want to stop doing this. Why would I want to continue this? And that's the exclusive nature of physical sports. Esports, amazingly open. If you want to create a new identity, log into a different server, play a different game, your size, your strength don't matter. If you want to spend the time to learn the maps, learn the tactics, the strategies, you're going to do well at those things. So there, you're as good as you choose to be because you're choosing whether you're training, but you are sat in the chair. Obviously, esports gets some negative on it as well for being isolating because people are staying at home. However, it's actually quite the opposite, because you're interlinking with the global community in a lot of cases, either through text, through verbal, or anything else, depending on the medium you use to communicate with your teammates and your community. So it's actually really good on that. Bizarrely, the most isolating activity you can do is reading a book. And that's something that's generally highly praised by society, but you're utterly isolated when you're reading a book. So that communication element is there, but you are sat in a chair. So back to your question about what is techno-sports. So techno-sports is this area in the middle, this space in between the two worlds, where you have movement, you have energy, you've got fitness, you've got all these positive elements, and especially when you get to teamwork and everything else like that, that come from physical sports. But this domination of size and strength that we see in most instances, that obviously don't have any esports, that's taken away. And it's taken away by this merging of the technology in, and this use of this esports sort of concept. So in our case, it's the use of augmented reality to create a standardized size, basically. So when you're playing, you're trying to hit a target, not the player. And the target is the same size for it, no matter which person you're aiming at. So now everyone's the same size. You're throwing, in our case, you're throwing Hado, because Hado is the Japanese word for energy blast. So you're throwing energy blasts across the pitch, and they go at the speed they're programmed to, irrespective of how much or how little force you put into activating. So now everyone's the same strength. And once you've standardized size and strength, you've removed age, you've removed gender. It's about skill, tactics, training, reaction speed, all of these esport beneficial elements that we see. With all this fantastic open playing field, accessibility, everything else you get from esports, but still with all the movement, the fitness, and the energy of the classic sporting world.
So what does a game actually look like? If you've got standardized strength, you've got standardized size, where does the physicality come into it? How is that set up?
Okay, so if you don't get hit, you need to move. And so it's about evasion and moving. And that means it's about moving yourself. So it's about your personal, I suppose, power to weight ratio, which is a trainable thing. You can train yourself to be more agile. You can train yourself to move your own body efficiently within a space, because that's not dependent on whether you're big or small. That's unique to you, and anybody can become more efficient in how they move themselves. And that will happen just through play. Mm-hmm. So matches are short. They are 80-second rounds. Most tournaments you'll play multiple rounds in a match. In the UK, we tend to do a lot of sort of like best of 3 setups for when it's a cup formation, a sort of cup style match. And we have a format called League. And in League, you play 7 games back to back with 100-second recovery between each one. So it's about 21 minutes for a match, and you'll play 3 matches across a 3-hour period. So that's basically quite a pretty intense hit workout. In terms of the style of activity you're doing, obviously, the more accurate your opponents become, so the more skilled your opponents are, the more you have to move to not be hit. So it really sort of pushes you through. So we get some very, very high speed, very active motion, especially at the top competitive level. And we're seeing now we've got a lot of sort of grassroots teams starting to come through, and the movement and energy from those younger players now is quite incredible.
Interesting. So how has reception been? So you've brought this over to the UK from a cultural standpoint. You mentioned that part of the genesis of the idea for Hado was from being surrounded by manga, things like Dragon Ball Z. It was a formative part of my childhood as well, so I've got a little bit of nostalgia going on there too.
Yep.
How did it come across when you brought it over here?
It was interesting. When we first brought it across, I was working, I still do, but I was working at that point exclusively within the sort of leisure and entertainment industry in the UK. And we were looking for experiences and events, and it works okay in that market. But we kind of misjudged it because we went much more heavily down that sort of gaming route. And we were finding we were getting interest, but nothing like what we were seeing in Japan and in the other countries that were taking on Hado at that point. Because Hado was very young when we got back involved, because we've been involved with Hado since sort of summer 2018. Mm-hmm. And it was still, I think it was like less than 10 countries at that point that were involved with Hado. And we were really scratching heads about why we weren't seeing this growth. And then we realized that the sort of like I suppose sort of like anime gamer sort of market things that we were targeting at, thought it was cool to come and have a go. But, sports, activity, exercise, it was a lot of effort. We weren't necessarily targeting people who were looking for in any way sort of physical outlets for activity. And we realized we needed to change that approach. And we looked at what Japan was focused on. Japan was much more focused on sport. And so we started to change that setup and looking much more into the sporting communities, because we interacted with quite a lot of different sporting communities through the things we do. And that was where it immediately started to flip around. So it wasn't about people who necessarily did physical sports. It was about people who were competitive, because obviously it is a competitive sport. If you yourself are not competitive in any way, then a competitive sport, whether it be a physical sport or an e-sport, everything has its limitations. Even Hado, as much as it's painful to say it, but you've got at least to have some competitive element to you in order to want to compete in something. But once you realised that was where it really started ticking around, where some people started getting involved. We started getting involved with big shows. So Insomnia Gaming Festival was the first one we got involved with. We've been talking to them for a little while before we started with Hado, with some of the other activities that we do. But Hado was the one for them that they saw it and went, no, that's amazing, right? We want you at the show. We want you to come in. While we were there, we had a chance meeting with a guy called Dan Penter. And Dan, at that point, about 2 weeks prior to that show at Insomnia, had just founded the RAF Esports division. I think at that point he was wing commander, Dan Penter. RAF Esports, and now I think it accounts something like 3 or 4% of all RAF personnel are members of the RAF Esports division. So it's a phenomenally successful element within the RAF. We got them on the pitch, we got them playing, which they absolutely loved. We then got involved with an event called Hyper Japan, and Hyper Japan is a massive event looking at every aspect of Japanese culture, from J-pop, anime, cosplay, to sake tasting, to how to make perfect sushi, to anything and everything you can think of related to Japan. We went there, we met some amazing teams, some of whom are still playing with us now. So like 5 years on, are still competing in the sport. And we realized that actually we had 2 key markets. One was people looking for interesting, engaging, competitive activity. And the other one, the 2 groups are probably equal in the rate at which people come into sport, are people who have an absolute love and fascination of Japanese culture. So we realized there was both this cultural and sporting aspect behind what really drove lots of people. Getting people to come and play is no trouble at all. We go to a show and we are literally back to back from the moment the show opens to the moment the show closes, constantly people through the courts playing, trying it out. Everyone leaving with a big smile on their face, really enjoying it. But the people who come back and compete on a regular basis and get teams set up and everything else, definitely there's sort of highly competitive people, but looking for something really engaging to compete in. And those with a really strong link to Japanese culture.
And how did you come across this? You mentioned you were in leisure and entertainment beforehand, but not in the techno-sport area. How did you find Hado?
So last 15 years, we've been running a whole range of different activities, and we specialize both in niche sports and events and activities. So we do a lot of live action gaming. We do European martial arts.
What would a European martial art be?
I teach an art called Fiore, which is a 14th century Italian art. But I mean, the term martial arts is European in and of itself, because it's the arts. It's the arts and arts. The oldest martial art for which we have direct imagery is an art called Pancreaton, which is Greek. And we know
the wrestling where you can go for joint manipulations, isn't it?
Pancreaton, the art, we only have artwork for it. But the artwork, has a lot of similarities in its artwork to what we see in the battlefield form of Muay Thai. And we know that was in the original Olympics. The oldest martial arts manuscript in the world, where the original manuscript, so the first edition manuscript exists, is a German art from the 13th century. It's known as Manuscript I-33. And it's a guide to the use of a single sword and buckler that was taught to knights during the lead up to the Crusades. And there are a whole range now. There's could be at least 15 or 16 different European arts that have been fully restored and resurrected. About 20 years ago, or 20, 25 years ago, there was a period of time where we had historical researchers who found texts in museums and personal collections, where they started working through, but they happened to also be martial artists and realized what they were looking at, and they were finding the original treatises of the European masters. So long before the crossover to Asian culture or anything like that. And those manuscripts have been translated, restored, fully processed, and put back into living, breathing art forms again. We host, one of our venues, we host the biggest European martial arts event in the UK every year. which is everything from that sort of 13th century German sword and buckler work all the way through to the World War II British Commando hand-to-hand combat training.
Wow.
That's normally about 16, 17 countries represented at it. I think it's about 40 workshops and classes, plus close to a dozen tournaments across a 5-day period.
What a fantastic tangent.
So we do lots. We were very much involved in niche and unusual things. Basically, I get bored. I go looking for interesting things, and I end up taking them up. So I instruct on the 14th century art form, on the practical shooting we do. I qualified as a handgun safety examiner and I was a range officer. We host a lot of tournaments and events on that side as well. We started off against some of the biggest UK tournaments based around that sport as well. So we've done a lot of different things across a lot of different genres and styles. We even brought in an experience into the UK. Again, we were the first one with it, called Rage Room, which went amazingly. I think at the peak, sort of pre-pandemic, we had, I think it was close to 80 squads a week coming through the Rage Room. In Rage Room, you get togged up in your safety gear, so overalls, face shield, gloves, key your phone to the Bluetooth speaker system in the room, take a choice of glassware, computer monitors, printers, keyboards, your preferred weight of baseball bat, and just let rip. And it was
pretty self-explanatory from the name then.
Absolutely. I mean, we ended up on Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan doing a whole lead-in piece with the reporters in there live. We ended up on Microsoft's Ticketation News, Ticketation News for like 3 days straight. I think it was like the second thing to do in the UK on Al Jazeera. It was like 30 odd different newspapers with it. We had somewhere between 15 to 20 different pop videos filmed in there, all sorts of things. But what we had with all these different niche activities, and that was that sort of mindset that made us go out into the world and look for these things, was the same mindset that then led us to find Hado. The difference with all of those things is that they were concepts, but they were not owned IP. I think it's the best way of putting it. They were either already community based, and we just helped to enhance them and take it up to be part of the group, took it up to the next level, or they were ideas that anyone would look and go, well, "That's a good idea. I'll do that." And so we ended up with with either huge expansion that was outside of what we were controlling, or where other people just basically started copycatting what we were doing. So we were looking for something that had a more technological aspect to it. And as with a lot of things we randomly come across, we found it on YouTube. Realized that, thought it looked amazing with Hado. It was obviously still in fairly early stages at that point, but the competitions and tournaments there, I think they've had their very first sort of major international tournament. Some of the video footage and that we saw, which had been, end of 2017, sort of their first ever tournament. And, we go, that's it. Right there, that's it. That's what we want. Started looking around, realized it didn't exist in the UK, it didn't exist in Europe, or I think there might have been a location in Spain, but it was closed down for refurbishment, and it was someone who'd randomly taken it on us at an escape room.
Okay, so kind of like a niche convention.
Yeah, it was something to do while you were waiting for the escape room, but basically it was, their escape rooms at that point was closed down for renovation anyway, so fundamentally there was nowhere you could go. And so we tracked down a contact at Meleap, Tomita-san, who was at that point was the sort of chief business development officer for Meleap. We got into a conversation with him across Google Meet, and then ended up off the back of that to getting on a plane and going out to Tokyo. Because obviously the stuff looked amazing, but you're not going to invest a whole load of money or do something without actually seeing it, knowing it works, understanding it, and everything else. So we went out there, met the guys. It was amazing. Saw where they're going with it. What was happening with it, and we did the deal while we were out there and brought it back with us to the UK. And the whole sort of journey's then gone from there.
Fantastic. And now that it's back in the UK, you're very heavily involved in the youth sports scene. What happened with Children in Need? Because that's where I heard of this from.
Yeah. So Children in Need was it. So I think I mentioned to start with it. Basically, our very first shows we got involved with things like Insomnia Gaming Festival.
Yep.
And we've been doing Insomnia we've done every Insomnia since 2019, I think it is. And the team at Insomnia have a significant tie-in with a lot of the production and directors teams to linking in with events at the BBC. And the BBC started off actually in 2022. For the first time, they wanted to include gaming as part of Children in Need. which, as BBC being the revolutionary organisation that it is, that would make them the final major charity to include gaming. But at least they were
First mover.
Fast mover. But they were going to do it. It was, that looks really good. And they wanted to look at gaming and event activity that wasn't just sat in the chair. Because the moment that anything to do with the mainstream, whether it was the BBC, sort of like as we saw with the Commonwealth Games, when they talk about esports, the public perception, especially from old generations, is so negative. The backlash about it is so significant because of this lack of understanding of fundamentally what's the difference between watching someone else play a computer game or someone else kick a ball. You're not doing it. But somehow it's different if they're kicking a ball to clicking a mouse button. But we know that's such a negative backlash that they wanted something that was outside of that standard situation. And the guys in Insomnia said, well, have you seen Hado? So we had a load of meetings with the BBC, and that was all going really, really well. And they were going to be launching a show a bit as part of John and Need, this gaming show event. And it was going to be ourselves and another IP. And things didn't work out for whatever reason with the other IP. And the show got pulled literally like about a month before it was due to film. The whole show got shelved, which was not great for us and very disappointing for the team at the BBC. They then came back to us the spring afterwards and went, look, you guys were there all the way through with us. We want you to be part of the show. We know we can rely on you. We're going to expand it through now. We're going to add more IPs there. So if we do get a situation of someone pulling out, we don't suddenly lose half the show. And they wanted to go a lot more physical. So they had themselves on board. They got Just Dance and the Formula One racing sims because they wanted to look at the tangible physical sides of gaming and sports and activity. And everything kind of rolled through from there. But now because they wanted to make a much bigger show and make a bigger event, and they wanted us to basically bring, it would have been effectively almost like just showpiece matches with a lottery to enter on the first version of the show. Second version of the show, they wanted celebrity teams. It's the BBC, so they want you to play against celebs on there. But they wanted people to do something to get there to sort of make the event a bigger part of the community. And so we used the connections that we got because it was like them. So the BBC, so they went, great. So we went to you and okay, you can do that. We'd really like to do a national tour to find these winning teams. Brilliant. Okay, so because we've got to show we're across the UK equally, that means we're going to need 5 England locations, 1 Scotland, 1 Wales, 1 Northern Ireland. Went, okay, yeah, we can get a team to across location. Like, that's no problem. We went, great. Can you find us the locations? Yeah, okay, we can probably do that. We can work on that. So we hunted around, we found locations and went, great. Can you recruit the teams to play at the location? Yeah, we can work with the locations to do that. We can promote and obviously work with you guys to promote how this is going to happen. And we'll get a system in place for that, for how teams can apply and everything else. It's all good there. Brilliant. Now, obviously this requires a budget and sure, no, we don't have one because
we're a charity, so we can't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you find some sponsors? So fortunately, for a while now, we've been working along with Ericsson because Hado has got a huge amount of tie-in with different elements of 5G technology, and it works really well as an example of some very cool stuff you can do with 5G. And we went and said, well, we can go to shows with you for a while. We've been out to Mobile World Congress with them as part of their example and the rest of it, demonstrating what you can do with it. We went, great. We've shown all of this cool stuff at shows about multi-venue play, about broadcast, about content creation, high quality across 5G and everything else. But it's only been at shows. Are you interested in working with us to actually do this, to build yourself a full case study of a full set of broadcasts done with the BBC? And shockingly enough, they said yes. So rather than talking about it, we can have a full set of case studies with someone we know already has the tech that grabs people's attention. And it's all tied in with the BBC for us doing these broadcasts. So fortunately, that was a fairly easy sell. They also brought Virgin Media O2 on board with them. So it was a joint project between Ericsson and VMO2. That then basically allowed us to do this huge national tour with streaming and content creation, reach the locations, all being done across the private 5G standalone network. So we could basically do the content, do the events from all these different locations without having to worry. Because if you're in a college, for example, you can't just plug into the college's internet, because it's all firewall, it's protected, the student data and everything exactly as they should be. But you go, but I want to broadcast this. I can't. Hence why the partnership then works so well. And that led us through then to the main show on Jump the Need, which went out on BBC Three a week before the show called Game On. It's still on iPlayer. People want to go and check it out. It was a really, really good experience. We got some fantastic matches out there. The celebrity teams got completely smashed by the teams that come through from the tournament scene, even though we'd actually banned all experienced teams from taking part. So every team that took part in the tournaments was rookies. Again, if people want to see the tournaments, they're all on the UK Hado YouTube channel as well. So all the tournaments of Jump the Need, everything that came through from that. And there's some amazing gameplay in that. But yeah, but that led us through into, and off the back of that, then with the BBC, we've then gone on to more and more things.
What are you working on at the moment?
So for us at the moment, the biggest part of it is to do with our grassroots growth of the sport. So we're engaged in a whole load of projects with the school games projects and organisers. For us, because our main centre is in Coventry, so we're heavily operating with Coventry at the moment. We've had an amazing feedback from schools we're working with there. I think we've got about 90 schools signed up with us there, and we've been approached for about another 30 or so schools from one of the sort of bordering regions to start working with us as well on the project. And they're bringing in the students who said, you get disenfranchised in sport when you're at school. So they're bringing in the disenfranchised students and suddenly finding that they're active, they're doing team things, they're running around, they're being physical, they're engaging, they're smiling and going, these aren't our kids don't do this with sport. And well, they do with Hado because, there's a reason for it. That, there is this need and this is answering it. So for us, that's a really big part of it. We're also working with a lot of big youth charities and groups on the same basis to get people active and mobile. And we're massively upping the tournament scene this year across the UK. So rather than things over the last couple of years, we've been quite heavily hosted around the Midlands, but now we've got licensees spread all the way from Brighton up to Newcastle with Hado locations. And so we're starting to aim to sort of like distribute those tournaments all across the UK. So there's a lot more competitive matches, locations where people can get involved, where teams can get entry into the sport.
Well, what's the experience been like from the business side of this? So this is something which is very, very new. When you mentioned earlier that your initial big uptake came really from those individuals who have that strong cultural affiliation with Japan. There's that perception of it still being a computer game from the older generation on the one hand, then there's that different cultural aspects. In terms of building these relationships, in terms of getting involved with the youth sports scene, getting involved with education, which is, again, a relatively slow moving sector in the UK. What's that been like, trying to get these partnerships up and running and then get people more involved in something that you can see is obviously solving a problem, but what obstacles have you come up against with that?
So I suppose that there's two real major obstacles. One, most new technology, when it comes into market, is one step away from something that already exists. And therefore you can liken it to something for people to get a reasonable understanding. It's like this, but better because of X, Y, and Z. Hado by its nature is 2 steps away. And that makes it very difficult to explain to people what it is, why you want to do it, what the benefits are. And that's a big stumbling block for us. So the way to do it is to get people to play. You put a headset on, you play, and you suddenly realize, oh, this wasn't what I thought it was. This is something better. This is amazing. And that's why we go to the big shows like Insomnia, Hyper Japan. We go and do Formula E. We've done the Electric Scooter Championships. We go and do Comic Cons and all sorts of other things. Because not because we think that's necessarily where our the next great players are or teams are, but these are environments where you tend to have people who are interested in trying new things, new technologies, new ideas, playing new things, and there's large numbers of people. And so we are just getting exposure to as many people as possible to just put a headset on and see what this is. Because it's not virtual reality. It's not like the things people have tried before. It's a very, very different experience. It operates differently. And so we have that. So that's been our big one. That's why last couple of years, our focus has been on going and doing those shows. Why things like being on the BBC for that public awareness of this being a thing was so important. We got coverage across all the local BBC newses as we went around and did the tour as well. And that was such a big thing for us because you can't just show people a picture of it and they'll go, oh, yeah, I get it. Because they don't. Because it's 2 steps away from what they know. So we've had that as a big issue. The second one is that the biggest groups that I suppose can benefit from Hado, who've got the most to gain from it, are also tend to be the groups who are under a huge amount of pressure They've got very little budget. They've got very little time. They've got massive demands on them to achieve the things. And they're desperately trying to make do with what they've got. And that's why Hado can help them so much, because we can help alleviate a lot of that. But getting your head out of that pressure bubble to look at a solution that's outside of your current awareness, that's really hard. And so we spent a lot of time, and that's with sort of the youth group, schools, colleges, universities, all these different groups that we now work with. And we spend a lot of time trying to find the way to get to them, to be able to talk to them and show it to them, go, look, no, you need to look at this. And we eventually managed that via Culture Council, then Sport Coventry, then down to the school games organisers, who are the guys who actually do a lot of the actual practical implementation on the ground on behalf of the sports authorities. And once we got to those guys and got them on the pitch, that was where things really started to revolutionise for us. And that's where we've now got all these different schools on board for where we are. The licensing up in Barnsley, which is Barnsley College, and that's actually, the license there is actually owned between Barnsley College and Yorkshire Sport. And they've done a massive amount along similar lines as well, with youth outreach, with female inclusion in sport, with disabled inclusion in sport, because Hado plays identically, for example, for a wheelchair user as it does for someone who's fully ambulant. So it's a way of getting a lot of activity, a lot of involvement in things that people might otherwise feel they're excluded from. And it's been used really effectively on that side. We get some fantastic case studies coming out from that as well now. And now people are starting to see that it's being done, it's happening. We're finding that effectively the next domino falls over quicker each time. But it took quite a long time to get that first domino knocked down.
So it's starting to reach that kind of critical mass, starting to be in the public perception a little bit.
Well, we're starting to see people come to us rather than us chase them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's next for you? You've done all of these things with children in need, heavily involved in youth sport around the Coventry area. What's on the horizon for Hado in the UK?
Well, our long-term aim is we want Hado to be an endemic sport in the UK. Just like, you go to school PE curriculum and you've got a whole range of things, and Hado is just one of the things on the list. And that involves, as well as it being at that grassroots level, that also involves a tournament expansion there. We're looking to hopefully host the first international tournament in the UK in the relatively near future, which would be quite a big coup for us to get to bring that here. As a country, we are the reigning European champions, so it's not too hard on that basis. And October, end of last year, we lost in the World Cup final to Japan, so we are ranked second in the world. And there are currently 42 countries playing the sport. We've also got a lot of crossover work starting with a lot of countries globally, because a lot of work done in the UK, we've figured out ways of basically interlinking courts. So therefore, although it's a physical team-based sport, the courts can basically use this digital benefit, and they don't have to be in the same court or even in the same country. And we are working quite heavily now trying to put together a league across the different Commonwealth countries that play Hado as the first steps towards basically application for demonstration or breakout towards the Commonwealth Games for techno-sports and for Hado. So it's very much now about building the tournament scene, building events, building that viewership, getting people involved in the sport, because all sports exist because people watch them long term. And so now we want competitions, we want teams, we want viewers, and everything that then goes with that to help build and grow this sporting experience out both within the UK and on a global level.
Fantastic. If people want to find out more about what you're doing, where should they go?
UK Hado on pretty much any social media, ukhado.com on the web. All our contact details are through there. We're looking, obviously, at all the locations, looking for players, teams, everything from people who just want a corporate experience to want to get involved with sport long-term memberships. We're also looking for a lot more locations that are interested in taking on Hado licenses to be able to open and offer the sport to people, because fundamentally, if you can't access the sport, you can't train and play, you can't get involved. So we need looking for everything within the whole equation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Jim. Sounds absolutely fascinating. I'm very much looking forward to getting up to Coventry myself and coming and having a play.
We'll get you on the court and put you through your paces.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. I'll make sure I put all of those links in the show notes for everybody. And thank you everyone for listening as well.
Cheers, Ben. Thanks for having me.